The philosopher who found purpose after losing everything, Leo Tolstoy. You thought you needed to win. You thought happiness was hiding behind success, applause, and admiration. You believed the point of life was to conquer, to climb, to be celebrated. But what if losing everything was the only real way to find yourself? Imagine building an entire life, only to watch it crumble, piece by piece, while the world keeps spinning without a care. Imagine reaching the pinnacle of success, only to feel more hollow, more tormented than ever before. This wasn't just anyone's story. This was Leo Tolstoy's descent into darkness, and his brutal rebirth. Stripped of status, wealth, and certainty, he uncovered a truth so raw, so unfiltered, that it shattered everything he once believed about purpose. In this video, you will not find cheap comfort. You will not hear the shallow promises of modern positivity. Here, we will walk through the ashes of a man's ruined illusions, and find the sacred fire he carried back from the edge. If you are willing to question everything you were taught about success, happiness, and meaning, stay with us. Hit the like button to help this truth reach more people, subscribe so you don't miss the next revelations, and activate the bell so you are among the first to awaken. This is not just a story. This is a mirror. Topic 1. The Illusion of Winning: How Tolstoy Lost Himself in Success. In the beginning, Tolstoy was everything the world praises: a successful writer, a celebrated figure, a man adored by thousands. Yet behind every standing ovation, behind every published masterpiece, something darker brewed, a slow, silent erosion of meaning. Success didn't fulfill him, it fractured him. The applause that once fed his ego now echoed like a hollow curse, louder with every passing day. As the novels grew in fame, Tolstoy's soul withered in silence. Each accolade felt more detached from his true self, as if the man they celebrated was a stranger wearing his face. His victories became shackles, binding him to an identity that no longer resonated. This was the first fracture, the first betrayal. Success was not salvation. It was a beautifully wrapped poison. How many of us chase dreams only to find they enslave us? How often does achievement mutate into a prison of expectation, a gilded cage built by our own ambition? Tolstoy's life stood as a brutal warning. The higher he climbed, the further he drifted from the ground of his own soul. Winning, he realized, was the most seductive way to get lost. Inside his own home, among family and friends, he felt a stranger. Their conversations about wealth, reputation, and politics seemed unbearably small compared to the aching questions that gnawed at him in the dark. What does it mean to live? Why do we suffer if everything ends in death? He had no answers, only the heavy silence of an unsatisfied heart. And so, a deep despair took root. It was not the despair of failure, but the despair of false success. A life crafted perfectly on the outside, crumbling invisibly from within. Every accolade became another reminder that he had drifted farther from the only prize worth winning: inner peace. Comment below. Have you ever achieved something you thought would make you happy, only to feel even more empty afterward? Your story could awaken someone else. Topic 2. The Collapse: When Everything You Built Becomes Meaningless. It came slowly, then all at once. Tolstoy, the celebrated master, fell into a spiritual abyss so profound that he contemplated ending his life. In secret, he hid the ropes and weapons that could make the final escape easy, while he outwardly played the part of the respected man. Few knew how close he danced to the edge of the void. This collapse wasn't triggered by a failure. It was triggered by success. By the horrifying realization that even after achieving everything he dreamed of, he felt nothing but dread. The great houses, the fame, the wealth, they were dust. Beautiful dust, but dust nonetheless. And dust cannot feed a starving soul. Imagine waking up one morning and feeling that nothing, absolutely nothing, matters anymore. That even your love for your family, your work, your passions, seem like elaborate illusions. That's the place Tolstoy found himself in. A bleak, infinite desert where even hope burned away. But there is a sacred violence in collapse. When the structures we trust crumble, when the myths we build our lives upon collapse, something hidden beneath the rubble begins to stir. In the ruins of Tolstoy's false life, a deeper hunger awakened, not for fame, not for comfort, but for truth. He understood that the life he had meticulously constructed was a performance, not a calling. And that all performances, no matter how grand, rot when the soul can no longer bear the lie. True collapse, brutal as it is, becomes a doorway. In losing everything he once worshipped, Tolstoy gained the most terrifying gift of all, the chance to start over, without illusions. The void wasn't a death sentence. It was an invitation. An invitation to seek a kind of meaning that fame and fortune could never offer. Have you ever felt everything you depended on start to collapse? Share your moment of breaking. It may be the first spark for your real beginning. Topic 3. The Death of the False Self. Tolstoy's rebirth through suffering. Tolstoy's rebirth didn't come through comfort. It came through annihilation. Every part of him that craved recognition, wealth, power, it had to die. Piece by piece, he let the false self fall away. He stopped writing for fame. He renounced his noble title. He gave up possessions. The man society praised no longer existed. But the death of the false self is not quick. It is a slow, agonizing surrender. A peeling away of every mask, every ambition, every shallow dream. There were days Tolstoy barely recognized himself. Days when he wondered if anything of the old him would survive. But deep beneath the collapse, something truer was rising. In shedding his old life, he began to live. For the first time, he could hear the faint whisper of a real voice, not the one crafted by society, but the one buried deep in the marrow of his being. A voice not concerned with appearances or applause, but with the purity of truth itself. Suffering was not his punishment. It was his purification. Pain burned away the layers that had shielded him from himself. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of despair carved him closer to something sacred. In pain, Tolstoy found clarity. In loss, he found freedom. The price of rebirth was brutal, but it was the only price worth paying. No longer seduced by the shallow victories of the world, he began the quiet work of building a life aligned with a higher truth. A life not measured by admiration, but by authenticity. This is the hidden purpose of losing everything, not to destroy you, but to strip you down until only the essential remains. Until you are finally free to be who you were always meant to be. What part of your life are you still clinging to, even though you know it must die for you to be reborn? Share below. Your courage could inspire another. Topic 4. The Inner Pilgrimage. Tolstoy's quest for a meaning beyond the world. Once stripped of his titles, possessions, and illusions, Tolstoy was not left in peace. Instead, he found himself standing at the foot of a vast and merciless desert, a place where no worldly success could save him, no familiar path could guide him. This was not an external journey, but an inner pilgrimage, one that would force him to confront the deepest abysses of existence itself. Every step forward was a step away from everything he had once called truth. For the first time, Tolstoy stopped asking what others expected from him and began asking the questions that mattered. Why are we here? What is the point of living if death devours all? Why do we crave love, purpose, eternity if all we have is dust? These questions did not yield immediate answers. They gnawed at him, hollowed him out, tore apart every easy certainty he once held. And in that hollowing, something extraordinary happened. Space was made for real truth to enter. Tolstoy realized that society had handed him an empty script: work, achieve, reproduce, grow old, die, a story without a soul. He could no longer pretend that wealth or reputation could redeem the terror of mortality. Nor could he accept that life was a meaningless accident. Somewhere, he intuited, there had to be a deeper current running beneath the madness of existence. A current he had to surrender to, or be crushed by the weight of despair. This pilgrimage was not marked by grand revelations, but by small, brutal awakenings. Moments when he watched the sunrise not as a beautiful aesthetic event, but as a raw reminder that life continues whether we find meaning or not. Moments when he sat among peasants, simple men and women who toiled the earth, and saw in their eyes a kind of faith, a resilience that all the libraries and salons of the aristocracy had failed to teach him. He began to grasp that truth was not something invented by intellectuals, nor sold by the powerful. Truth was something humble, something ancient, something closer to the beating heart of life itself. It was in the soil, in suffering, in forgiveness, in sacrifice, in love without conditions. It was not a theory to be debated. It was a life to be lived, and to be lived simply. Tolstoy's inner pilgrimage led him to recognize that real purpose is not crafted, it is discovered. Not through mastery of the world, but through surrender to something far greater, far more mysterious, and far less controllable than we dare admit. His search was far from over, but the path was clear. He would no longer live for the applause of the dying. He would live for the invisible, eternal fire within. Have you ever walked away from everything you were told would make you happy, only to find yourself at the beginning of a much deeper journey? Share your story below. Your voice could light the way for another. Topic 5. A Faith Reborn. How Tolstoy Found God Without Religion. Tolstoy's search for meaning led him down a treacherous path, not towards the churches and doctrines of his society, but into a solitary wilderness where even God seemed absent. Raised nominally Christian, he found no solace in the rituals and hypocrisy of organized faith. Priests preached comfort while living in luxury. The poor suffered while their spiritual leaders blessed the rich. Tolstoy saw through the facade. If there was a God, he was not to be found in the gilded halls of power. For a time, Tolstoy hovered in a terrifying space, unable to believe in the false God of his culture, yet desperate for something sacred, something real. In that emptiness, in that honest, agonizing hunger for truth, a different kind of faith was born. Not a faith built on dogma or institutions, but a faith forged in silence, suffering, and surrender. He began to see the divine not in sermons, but in life itself, in the humility of a peasant sharing his last piece of bread, in the perseverance of a mother nursing her child under a leaking roof, in the quiet dignity of an old man planting a tree he would never live to see bear fruit. The face of God, Tolstoy realized, was hidden in plain sight, not in marble cathedrals, but in the simple, stubborn acts of love, mercy, and resilience that stitched the torn fabric of existence together. This awakening shattered his previous understanding of faith. It was no longer about believing the right things or obeying the right authorities. It was about embodying the spirit of compassion, sacrifice, and radical humility, even when the world mocked and rejected it. It was about living as if every moment mattered, as if every soul was sacred, as if every breath was a miracle bought at the highest price. Tolstoy's faith was not easy. It did not offer guarantees of prosperity or protection from suffering. In fact, it demanded more suffering, the death of pride, the crucifixion of ego, the abandonment of worldly ambition. But in that sacrifice, he found a joy deeper than pleasure, a peace more enduring than success, a meaning more powerful than fear. In rediscovering God beyond the walls of religion, Tolstoy found the courage to live a life that no longer depended on external validation. He was free, not because he had conquered the world, but because he had surrendered to something greater than the world could ever offer. Have you ever experienced a moment when your understanding of faith shattered, and something deeper, something purer, took its place? Share your awakening below. Someone needs to hear it. Topic 6. The Silent Revolution, Tolstoy's final mission to the world. Tolstoy could have disappeared into solitude, content to live out his days in quiet contemplation. But true transformation never stays hidden for long. It demands to be lived out loud. Having tasted the terror of meaninglessness and the fragile beauty of rebirth, Tolstoy understood that he had a responsibility to bear witness, to challenge the lie of the comfortable life, to call others out of their stupor. He became a radical, not through violence, but through truth. He wrote furiously, attacking the institutions of his time, the church, the state, the aristocracy, even the very concept of ownership and war. His words burned like fire across the landscape of Russian society, exposing the rottenness beneath the gilded surface. He was excommunicated, censored, condemned. And yet he continued undeterred. Tolstoy believed that real revolution did not begin with the sword, but with the soul. Change the human heart, and the world would follow. Without inner transformation, all political revolutions were destined to fail, merely replacing one corrupt master with another. The true battlefield was within, and few had the courage to fight there. He called for a return to radical simplicity: love your enemy, renounce violence, refuse to serve corrupt systems, live honestly and humbly. To many, these ideas sounded naive, even insane. But Tolstoy had walked through death. He knew that the wisdom of the world was madness, and the madness of true faith was the only path to freedom. His final mission was not to build monuments, armies, or institutions. It was to ignite a fire in the hearts of men and women willing to risk everything for truth. A fire that still burns today, quietly, in those who dare to believe that another way of living is possible, even in a world bent on worshipping the false idols of power and wealth. Tolstoy's revolution was silent, but its echoes have never stopped. Every act of radical love, every refusal to bow to injustice, every sacrifice made for truth over comfort, is a continuation of the torch he carried. Where in your life is the silent revolution already beginning? Share it below. Your courage could be the spark someone else is waiting for. Topic 7. Living After the Fall. Tolstoy's ultimate lesson on purpose. To survive collapse is one thing. To live after collapse, truly live, is something else entirely. Many men lose everything and never recover. They wander the ruins of their former lives like broken ghosts, clutching at memories of who they once were. But Tolstoy refused to become a ghost. He understood that survival alone was not enough. His real task was to transform survival into purpose, ruin into revelation. Purpose after the fall is not found by resurrecting the past. It is not built by gluing the shattered pieces of an old life back together. It is born by daring to become someone entirely new, someone whose worth is no longer measured by the world's broken rulers. In the ashes of all he had lost, Tolstoy found the raw material to craft a life of radical meaning, a life that no one else could define or control. He simplified everything. He rejected titles, property, and vanity. He lived as the peasants lived, working the land, wearing simple clothes, eating plain food. Every day was a small rebellion against the empire of lies he had once served. Every breath was a prayer of gratitude for the brutal mercy that had torn him away from his illusions. Purpose was no longer a destination to chase. It was woven into the act of living itself. Tolstoy realized that the greatest enemy of the soul is not pain or loss, it is numbness. It is the slow death that comes from living a life dictated by others, chasing goals you no longer believe in, clinging to comforts that cannot satisfy. His rebirth demanded that he stay awake. That he choose, every day, to live deliberately, vulnerably, authentically, even at the cost of misunderstanding, rejection, and pain. Living after the fall meant accepting that he would never fully arrive. There would be no final victory, no perfect clarity, no external validation. Only the endless, sacred work of aligning his life with his deepest truths, again and again and again. In that endless labor, he found a peace that ambition had never offered. A peace built not on certainty, but on courage. Not on control, but on surrender. Tolstoy's ultimate lesson was brutal in its simplicity. You will lose everything you think you cannot live without. Your status, your wealth, your reputation, even your carefully curated identity, all of it will be stripped away. But in that stripping, if you are brave enough to stay conscious, you will find something indestructible. Something the world cannot touch or steal. You will find yourself. And in finding yourself, you will find a purpose that no catastrophe can erase. That was Tolstoy's gift to the world, not a formula for happiness, but a map through devastation. A living testimony that meaning is not the reward for avoiding suffering. Meaning is the sacred fruit of surviving it. Have you dared to envision who you might become after your own fall? Share below. Your vision might plant a seed of hope for someone standing on the edge. The ashes are sacred, embrace the death, find the fire. Leo Tolstoy's life was not a story of triumph. It was a story of collapse, agony, and surrender, and through that, a resurrection far more powerful than any worldly victory could ever offer. He showed that true purpose is not born in comfort or applause. It is born in devastation, when every false thing falls away and only the essential remains. He lost everything he thought he needed to survive. He was betrayed by success, abandoned by admiration, stripped of identity. And yet it was in that nakedness that he found a fire that could never be extinguished, the fire of truth, burning quietly, stubbornly, at the center of all things. That fire does not promise safety. It does not offer guarantees. But it offers something far greater, a life worth living. If you are standing in ruins today, if the life you built is crumbling around you, do not despair. The ashes are sacred. The collapse is not your enemy. It is your initiation. Somewhere inside the devastation is a new beginning, if you have the courage to dig through the wreckage and find the hidden fire. If this message resonated with you, if you felt even a spark of recognition in Tolstoy's brutal journey, honor that spark. Like this video so more souls can find it. Subscribe and ring the bell to continue walking this path with us. Because the world needs more people who have survived the fire and come back shining. And if someone you love is standing in the ruins, share this video with them. They may not even know yet how sacred their suffering is. We are just getting started. The next revelation is waiting for you.